March the 6th, 2024. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana Durnford, and you can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. How's everybody doing? We got a poll. Should the International Atomic Energy Agency be banned from nuclear power plant sites, the nuclear industry, for claiming that nothing got out of Fukushima's multiple nuclear meltdowns? This is not a poll that I should be asking at all. This is a poll everybody on the planet with a blog or Twitter or Facebook or alternative media should be asking. I don't see David Icke asking yet. I don't see any of the big bloggers out there asking that question. I see the opposite. I see them promoting Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Caldercott, the actual shills of the industry, over and over and over, and we've been warning them for 13 years. And the industry that is sent from me, that's how they make a living, by destroying the planet so they can get their paychecks on Friday. And all we can do is persevere and hope that the world finds us, and then hopefully we can have a conversation. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirms tritium levels below Japan's operating limits in the recent treated water released from Fukushima. So if you're not familiar, the official story is nothing got out of Fukushima whatsoever. Everything is contained in the tanks. We're going to challenge that narrative. The radioactive xenon-133, and this was one of the fallout maps of the xenon. This is 19.5 days of fallout. It was 450,000 times above detection levels. These are abandoned North America numbers. So the official story, this is pictures from TEPCO's website from the first... well, this showed up in the media after day 4 or something. Day 5, basically. This picture was worldwide. And so, do you really think that nothing got out of there? Is there anybody left on the planet that naive or gullible? Apparently there is. Just about everybody on the planet thinks nothing got out of there. Otherwise, these types of headlines wouldn't exist. And nuclear engineering. If you can't trust nuclear engineering, who can you trust? So, tritium and treated and all this other stuff. Here's another isotope. I just showed you xenon-133 of 450,000 times detection levels in the United States and Canada. These are just snowstorms. This is a death sentence for species. But there's many more isotopes. This is the iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life. There's 10 half-lives. So that's 150 million years. And 220 million atoms per liter of radioactive fallout. If you pour that on your skin, you'll burn your skin. This is so much we're talking about, because rain doesn't fall by a liter, of course. This saturated all the plants, all the trees, all your fresh water, your schoolyards, your communities, your automobiles. It saturated everything. And in the ecosystem, it destroyed the thyroid glands of every species. Every species was saturated now with perpetual anthropogenic man-made radiation. And so you sterilize the species. This is why you're not cleaning insects off your windshields in the summer times anymore. And don't worry, the media hasn't got your back. Here's the media to your right. This is just a fraction of them. And they're pretending they're in a building that no longer exists to your right. And the building should be about 150 feet taller than the whatever stump, I guess you call, to your left. And so the reactor cores are stored in the fuel pools at the very top of the buildings. There's about 10 reactor cores. They're still splitting atoms. They're hemorrhaging into the environment, and all of these disease factories, these are disease factories. Even if they don't melt down, they are splitting atoms into your environment. Once you take the fuel out of the reactor cores and puts it in a pool, it's boiling off 120,000 liters a day. And remember how a liter can aggregate radiation. Well, the fuel pools are just absurd. So they're all pretending that nothing happened, and here we are, everything's great, have a nice day. We love you, take care. And, you know, if that picture went viral, that would be the end of the nuclear industry, period. Greenpeace blocked me on every site that I tried to share that picture with. And Arnie Gunderson and Helen Caldicott. International Atomic Energy Agency confirms tritium. Tritium. So you had studies of 450,000 times detection levels. If your Geiger counter says 450,000 atoms, the Geiger counter will scream, run away. You have the modeling, accurate modeling, per se, immediately 19 days. Think about this snowstorm that pulses energy at the speed of light every second. No, none of that exists, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Humanity's biggest nightmare. The death of everything, you can blame it directly on the nuclear industry. It's not just cancer, it's many, many diseases. International Atomic Energy Agency confirms tritium levels below Japan's operational limits in the recent treated water release from Fukushima. You really think they just started releasing it? That's reactor 4. That's reactor 3. You really think nothing got out of there? When everything was gone by day 6? International Atomic Energy Agency is telling you nothing got out. All the media, the nuclear engineering, everything else is telling you nothing got out. The United States West Coast bore a significant brunt of hot particles. Not atoms. This is particles. So this is cement and steel and rebar that atomized in aerosol and ionized and radiated, actual particles. And these are much worse. These are called hot particles. So when you see a story like this of 20 million particles of radioactive iodine per liter fell on the U.S., don't confuse that with the lies they tell you. Hot particles bombarded the west coast of U.S. and Canada. This is Arnie Gunderson. And Arnie is the same person who told you that they're in the fuel pool. Now, he built the racks for the assemblies in the fuel pools. If he doesn't know where the fuel pools are, then who does? We didn't need Arnie Gunderson to tell us that because that was a big story. They used Arnie's name to give him street creds. But particles, so like for every iodine 131, there was 10 times more iodine 132, 30 times more iodine 133, 31 times more iodine 129. These are separate studies, by the way, that back up those assertions. Fukushima plume model showed 1 million atoms over the west coast per square meter, not cubic meter, but square meter. So it's radioactive fallout. So this could have been the Krypton 95. You got iodine 131. You got xenon 133. You got iodine 131, 129. Xenon 133. But I haven't seen a single model of tritium in 13 years. And you can look as long as you want and hard as you want, and you won't either. Here's another model. It's not tritium. But everything this stuff touches becomes tritium in water. Cesium-137, but that doesn't mean the other radiation disappeared or morphed. Cesium-137 immediately damages the heart muscles, not slow acting. This is France's study of 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. This is based on 9 days. The updated model is this model right here, based on 16 days, I believe this particular model was, at 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137. Cesium-137 pulses energy almost at the speed of light, 600 feet. Well, this model is based on 30 days, I think it is. Wait now. Yeah, 30 days since the tsunami. 25 days since the last reactor detonated. The whole planet is covered in 1 million to 10 million atoms per liter, or a cubic meter of air. So you got cesium-137 covering the entire planet. You got krypton-85 covering the entire planet. You got iodine-131 covering the entire planet. You got hot particles covering the entire planet. You got 220 million atoms per liter covering the planet. Because the size of these plumes we're talking about, that's what we're talking about. This is covering the planet in about 30 days. And most of the models suggest it's 20 days. But no, don't worry. Don't listen to the truth. Just listen to the perpetual lies. And the International Atomic Energy Agency confirms. They confirmed it. They checked it. That nothing got out. They confirmed that nothing got out. Same as the media. They confirmed that nothing got out. So then everything I'm showing you is a lie. Except it's not. Don't worry, everything is treated. I swear it's treated. Everything is treated. And it's just tritium, Dana. It's treated tritium. And the International Atomic Energy Agency wouldn't lie about treated tritium, right? Except that's exactly what they're doing, isn't it? So live data, the ALPS water release. The ALPS system in 2014 in August didn't work. It hadn't worked. Neither did the Areva system. Neither did the Siri system, the Korean system. Big problem, cracked floors in Fukushima reactors are leaking. And you've seen the numbers, you've seen the buildings. Do you really think anything is leaking? Into the groundwater that's rising and rising and rising through the TEPCO's wall can no longer be stopped from getting in the ocean. Worse than that, the buildings are now on mushy land. It's called liquefaction. Now, the video itself is really bad. The audio is perfect. This is Rupert Winfield Hayes. I'm going to play that, and this is 2013. This is before he pretended he was in the reactor 4 fuel pool. I'll show you those clips. And reactor 3, and I'll show you that clip in a second. But before he done that, he reported on the radioactive water. And that was what they were putting into the tanks. This is very telling. So only the audio was good on this.
As they grapple with how to dismantle the shattered reactors at Fukushima, engineers are now facing a fresh emergency. The Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
So this is really why we've been brought here. Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion after the tsunami disaster. But down inside this pool behind me here is still a vast amount of nuclear fuel. You can see it down there beneath the water. More than 1,300 fuel rods. Those have got to come out. They're currently 30 meters above ground level. This whole building is still not entirely stable, so they've got to get those out. This is very strange to be standing inside here, because this huge structure I'm standing inside is right on top of reactor building number 3, and down underneath.
So he says he's in reactor building 3, right? Which is that building over there. And before that he said he was in reactor 4. But the video of him before that was him talking about the tanks and how the water was being pumped up to the ground from the ground because of the liquefaction. And that's what was in the tanks. Which is a completely different story than what you're hearing, isn't it? So the ALPS system is a complete fable. So he claimed he was in the fuel pool 150 feet above the stump here, and in the fuel pool 150 feet above the stump over there. Because that's reactor 3, the last clip. And the middle one was this one right here. And BBC is the biggest media. Let's continue playing that.
3. And down underneath me here is the melted reactor core inside this building.
So reactor
Over the top here they have built a shield to lower the radiation levels so that we can come up here, so that workers can come up here to construct this. But radiation levels are still very high here, and because of that we can only spend a few minutes here. Now if you come over here, there's my alarm going off. This is the spent fuel pool. Down inside here more than 560 spent fuel assemblies.
The solution is geothermal. Every community can build it. IAEA predicts radioactive cesium will be carried across the Pacific to the west coast of the United States and Canada in 1 to 2 years. That's 2011. But the same International Atomic Energy Agency is now telling you that nothing got out. And that the only thing that's getting out is tritium. And that's what's in the 1,000 tanks. But BBC told you in 2013 that the tanks are full of absurd levels of nuclear waste from water poured directly on the melted remaining fuel. But the International Atomic Energy Agency is now telling you that everything is treated. They predict radioactive cesium will be carried across the Pacific. Live data for you. My apologies, I smurfed that one up, did I? I'll fix that. Fukushima Daiichi has contaminated the biggest body of water on the planet. And the radioactive, calling it leaks is, it's just unbearable every time I see the word leak to harm marine and human life. And the whole Pacific Ocean likely to have cesium levels because apparently uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, everything doesn't exist. Only cesium, folks. 10 times higher than at the peak nuclear bombs testing. The air in Tokyo was 270 times more radiation than peak nuclear bomb testing. But no, everything is in the ALPS is treated, Dana, don't worry about it. It's all good. U.S. West Coast to be hard hit by Fukushima ocean contamination. The North Pacific are gyral transporting radioactive material to America. But as I showed you earlier, the radioactive fallout covered the whole planet in 30 days, right? No, everything is treated, Dana. We're the International Atomic Energy Agency. We wouldn't lie to you. Radioactive iodine is 7.5 million times the legal limit, which is absurd numbers, by the way. So you're talking about multi-billion. And cesium at 1.1 million times the legal limit, which is, now you're talking about multi-billions again, per cubic centimeter. Says it detected 300,000 atoms of iodine-131 per cubic centimeter. 300,000 atoms per cubic centimeter. How many cubic centimeters are in a liter? And then this would have been saturated. Like, it's really hard to detect iodine when the signal is basically going to be drowned out by the curium isotopes and the plutonium isotopes and the uranium isotopes. Because that's the energy they're giving off, that's the biggest signal is one that's going to pick up. No, everything's treated, Dana. It's only tritium. Have a nice day, Dana. Discharges of Fukushima nuclear material into the Pacific have effectively contaminated the sea. That's the Japan Times. The same Japan Times is now telling you nothing ever got out. The melted reactor cores will burn again if water is not perpetually poured in. And before this, it needed 4,500 tons a minute, each reactor, 1 million gallons a minute. TEPCO proposes some of it being dumped into the ocean. But a few months after that, Rupert Winfield Hayes was telling you that they can't contain anything. And they decided to build a bunch of tanks and suck up the water before the whole site was liquefaction and put that into the tank. But because it was such high levels, they ran out of tanks in 2013. But the reality of it was, because you've seen the buildings, you can't contain anything. They told you so many lies, they can't just keep up with it anymore. And every administration doesn't understand the previous lies the last administration has told. So officially now, nothing got out and everything is in the tanks is only tritium. Fukushima contamination in the ocean, the Japan government, that administration said that the contamination in the ocean reached Alaska in under a month. This administration is no, everything is treated, nothing got out, and this is not tenable. We're losing everything. We're losing our planet. And I wish like hell there was a whole bunch of competition doing what I'm doing and drown my voice out. But it's not. Twice as much contaminated water, and I'm ready to go to war. I just don't have the support. Twice as much contaminated water entering the ocean from Fukushima as the officials claimed. 600 tons. So, wait a second. In 2013, they said, or 2024, they're saying nothing got out. In 2013, they're acknowledging 600 tons. But 600 tons, well, first off, a garden hose, like a typical garden hose, like a little 3/8 garden hose everybody has in their, if they own a house, they live in a house, everybody has a garden hose. That's what your typical garden hose is, a 3/8 hose. And if you leave the water on 24 hours a day, that's 140 tons. It's 140 tons. Which is what they said they've been accumulating in 2015, 2016. They told so many lies they just can't keep track of it. Fortunately, I can. 600 tons of groundwater is nothing, because normally the reactors need 4,500 tons every single minute to maintain the temperature. So when it burns at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, you're going to need an absurd amount more water than you typically would, which is 1 million gallons, 4,500 tons a minute, right? So this model takes us up. This is the Chinese model, I believe, of cesium-137. Yeah, cesium-137. And I'm going to speed the model up a little bit. This takes us up to March this month of 2024, which is this year. But no, then nothing happened. Everything is now erased, and we're only allowed to believe the International Atomic Energy Agency's current law. But when you look at the documentation, because that actually exists, Fukushima ocean plume, this is a government report from Fisheries and Oceans Canada, hit Canada 6 months ago. That's 2013. But the radioactive fallout, as I showed you at the beginning, hit the entire ecosystem worldwide in the first 30 days from multitudes of isotopes. I only showed you a fraction of the documentation that's available. Water with nuclear fuel is coming up from the ocean floor off the Fukushima coast. A Tokyo professor. 156 quadrillion. That's after trillion, right? Atoms, not because a Becquerel is a pulse of energy. Consider that an atom, and it does that every second. Of cesium-137, once in the basements, it's more than double Chernobyl. Getting close to the total fallout from every atomic bomb test in history, and maybe outputting from the seeps and the seafloor. Now, they're only talking about the seafloor in front of the nuclear disaster site, and that they actually cemented that floor. Right, there was a big story, and I forgot to include that in tonight's lineup. Fukushima radiation is a possible culprit in a huge starfish die-off from Mexico to Alaska. And of course, I'd done the research from Mexico to Alaska, and it's complete extermination of all the species. I smurfed up. Hang on. How did I smurf that up? That one must be this one. We're getting there. All right. Yeah, this was the one we left off on, right? There we go. We're back on schedule. Fukushima radiation culprit. Oh, so that was the end of it. Okay. So seniors, let's go back to 2012. And the food was banned by 55 countries in 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima prefecture. And so the seniors were urged to eat the radioactive food. So if we got food and it's contaminated with cyanide, should we urge the seniors to eat it? If we got food and it's contaminated, heavily contaminated with botulism, should we urge the seniors to eat it? If we got food and it's contaminated with Ebola, should we urge the seniors to eat it? Who've worked all their life and deserve to retire? Or should we put it in a confinement and contain it for 1 million years? But the disconnect is so blatant in Japan that this is the Japan Times, by the way, the biggest media in Japan, urges the seniors to eat the radioactive rice to help the murdering farmers and to protect the young people. The story defies all kinds of logic. A Tokyo senior is raging an individual effort to get the elderly people to eat the rice grown in the Fukushima prefecture to help the locals, farmers, struggling with rumors that their crops are radioactive. Well, of course they're radioactive. There's multiple nuclear meltdowns and 8 fuel pools. But imagine what kind of boogeyman you got to be to help cover that up. The media, the journalists, the academics, the professors, the social media networks. The list is so long that are in on this, and it just seems impossible. How can everybody be in on this? I don't know, but they are. And the evidence, I can and have been providing it relentlessly forever. The crops are radioactive. Make sure that the grain isn't consumed by the vulnerable younger generation. So if it's a rumor, why are you worried about the vulnerable generation? And everybody is vulnerable to anthropogenic man-made radiation. Everything with replicating cells is vulnerable to it. Like the disconnect is really something. This is a video from the media, and you've seen this picture. I took it and turned it into a circus, basically, where you got a zombie in the field. I'll start from the beginning again in a second. But this is a picture where farmers harvest rice in the paddies in Fukushima, Katsururo, which is populated, by the way. And these are 1-ton bags of radiation. They're harvested. This is basically the same field. And I can't comprehend that the world is not upset about this. I can't comprehend it. I can't comprehend how everybody is not up in arms over this. How this is not one of the biggest stories in human history. It's definitely the biggest betrayal in human history. Where you're encouraging the most vulnerable, the elderly, who have worked all their life to give you liberties and freedoms and infrastructures, roads and everything else, highways and electricity, and then they're to be discarded like a paper towel. It's so hard for me to comprehend it. Consumers have shunned the radioactive rice due to massive radioactive fallout stemming from it's not a triple meltdown, and they're so arrogant they don't even give it the prominence that it deserves. Triple nuclear reactor meltdowns, but it's actually 4 and 8 fuel pools that melted down, and each fuel pool might have 8 to 10 reactor cores. And in capacity, each reactor core is equal to at least 100 Chernobyls. The equivalent, basically, the reality is it's over 4,000 Chernobyls melting down. And I would definitely venture to say it's infinitely worse than that. How can you have farmers harvesting rice right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation? How is that possible? See, and it's done in right alongside the nuclear meltdowns, where that community is in Okuma. That community has actually been abandoned for 13 years because of lethal levels of radiation. And they're harvesting food for sale right alongside the 1-ton bags of radiation. And that blows my mind that a picture like that can actually exist. And yet, nobody is upset that this is not the biggest story in history. The elderly must eat the radioactive rice. They're calling on seniors to place orders by fax or online via social media sites, including Mixi and Facebook. Facebook is selling death. But you're not allowed to talk about many other things, because Facebook is the almighty good, when they're the almighty evil, aren't they? And they even provide the number so you can order in lethal radioactive food. Those interested in murdering their loved ones with radioactive food must pay cash on delivery and send a fax to Mass Murdering Corporation. And about 700 kilograms was bought by an elderly care facility in Tokyo. Imagine putting your loved ones in an elderly care facility to live out their final years, and they feed them food that's going to destroy their immune system, and they're going to have an awful death from it. Because radiation deaths are awful. This is awful stuff. And if we took these criminals and convicted them of their crimes against humanity, I still couldn't justify feeding them radioactive rice. It's such a cruel death. I'd suggest burning them alive at the stake, mind you, but I couldn't do it with radioactive rice because it's such a cruel death. At least burning them at the stake, they die that day. But to get sick from radiation is a horrific illness. Grown food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation, and the world is not upset. I don't even know how this is even possible. I'm heartbroken. That, however, is a minute amount compared with the Fukushima 240,000 tons of annual rice. Let me go back to that for 1 second. 240,000 tons, which is metric, because the Japs are metric, right? The murdering Japs. They don't deserve to be called Japanese. 240,000 tons times 2,200 pounds. Now, we're only talking about Fukushima prefecture. Remember, 14 prefectures. This is only rice we're talking about. It's actually infinitely more than that. So let's multiply that by 14 prefectures. That's 7.4 billion pounds a year. The numbers are way higher than that, by the way. Food being produced in nuclear wastelands and shipped around the world to get rid of you. So why aren't you trying to get rid of them? Wouldn't that seem like the solution? I would, like, if they're doing to you, why not do it to them? Why not buy the radioactive food and set up little carts outside their businesses or wherever their children hang out and poison them? 30 million 1-ton bags. You have no mistake, they're doing it to your children in the schools. He said his reason for doing this is not only because he wants to help the farmers murder everybody, but because he wants to make sure the elderly eat as much of the deadly food as possible to prevent the children from getting sick. Like, this is a journalist writing the story, and I can't wrap my mind around that kind of evil. That's the Japan Times, and I just can't wrap my mind around this kind of evilness. What the fuck did we ever do to these people that they hate us and they want to poison everybody? And our elderly, the most vulnerable of society, the people that we should cherish, the people with the knowledge and the history and the legacy and the stories that we should never forget, being eradicated to help the farmers murder more people. Shouldn't the farmers be shot on sight? Shouldn't it be public execution for people like this? How could you not want public execution for these farmers? How does that actually work? This is the Japanese government's media, basically. Grown food right alongside 1-ton bags of radiation. And by the way, there's no regulations obliging restaurants and the makers of the box lunches, the bento, to list the origins of the rice that they're using. But why wouldn't there be? And why would they use the rice from a nuclear wasteland? Like how is this even conceivable, let alone possible? How the hell do we ever get to this point? And this may lead to children eating the Fukushima rice. Not mate, it's guaranteed to. This is why, there's 13,646 out of 38,000 children with thyroid tumors. And some people say, well, they're only 2 centimeters. Yeah, but the children's thyroid is only 2 centimeters. The adults is only 3 by 5 centimeters. And the children, because they're developing, then all these radioactive hormones are going to annihilate their health. Death by millions of becquerels. By the invisible atoms. So why don't the elderlies, whose potential for suffering health damage is lower than it is for youth? Well, how is it lower than it is for youth? The elderly's immune systems are already almost compromised. Now it's completely compromised. And they have an agonizing death now when they wouldn't have had that before. So if you took the person who wrote the story and the editors and the producers of this media, if you took their grandparents and start shoveling this stuff down their throat, they would lose their mind. They wouldn't clap their hands in joy. They'd do it for your loved ones, but they won't do it for their own, would they? And where are the police? How come? Because it's not illegal to poison you, see? Your government, your Congress, doesn't have the authority to make it illegal. No politicians do. This is why the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, who has the authority, is appointed by the president themselves, not by the politicians. How did we ever get this complacent that this was able to happen? Farmers are required to check the radiation level in their rice. Farmers are, who know nothing about radiation. What about the universities? What about independent corporations? Why would you leave it up to farmers? And farmers are given Geiger counters that don't work, and they don't know how to use them. And if you get a high dose to the Geiger counter needs to go back to the factory to get a reset, to be recalibrated or discharged, depending on how much damage it had from the exposures. And in fact, the farmers were told, if they got high radiation numbers, to mix it with rice that didn't have as high radiation numbers and then sell that. And the nuclear industries promoted this on a scale that's unimaginable to the average person, beyond comprehension for the average person. And now they've infested all of your supermarkets with this stuff. Another reason for promoting the rice is that he wanted to gain support from residents, so him and other groups can be asked to work at, calling it a crippled nuclear plant is insane, so that the younger, more vulnerable workers don't have to. So let's murder everybody so you can go there and murder yourself. So shouldn't these people be shot on sight? Wouldn't that make sense? These are worse than any serial killer I've ever heard tell of. I've never heard tell of a serial killer as vicious as these people. As the fears linger, Fukushima rice rebounds under secrecy. They don't tell anybody where the rice is from. A Fukushima prefectural government worker is advertising rice. I should mark that up. Rice from his prefecture at a Tokyo commercial facility in November 2018. at a Tokyo commercial facility, which is Fukushima rice. The shipments of the Fukushima rice have rebounded since 2011. This is 2018. And the bulk of the annual harvest of 15 tons from one farmer is designated for industrial use, mainly by convenience stores and restaurants, and simply labeled as domestic rice. So people don't know they're eating the poison. I'm so sad about it all, the farmer said. I'm so confident in the rice that I grow, so I wish to sell it openly under the Fukushima label. Because he's stupid. And a moron. And bless his heart, he's incapable of comprehending the damage, the carnage that he's going to inflict on hundreds of thousands of people because of his farm. And rice under the northeastern prefecture is still struggling to reach the pre-disaster levels for household use because of lingering consumer concerns, the ones that haven't been poisoned already. The nuclear disaster took a heavy toll on the prices of Fukushima rice, which should never have been sold. And they never stopped growing it. And the comeback was driven by solid demand for industrial use rice for products sold at convenience stores and dishes served at restaurants. Solid demand for industrial use, which has no label on it. They're not evil. They're way beyond evil. I don't have an actual verb to describe them. According to the Foreign Ministry survey, industrial use accounted for 65% of shipments of rice produced in Fukushima Prefecture, one of the highest ratios in Japan. No comparable figures are available, though, for pre-disaster periods. Of course there is. If they told you, you would be terrified. There is a high demand for industrial use rice from Fukushima Prefecture, which is cheap for its taste, one distributor said, one mass genocidal monster had claimed. Industrial use rice often carries a domestic label with no mention of Fukushima or the production areas. Since 2012, all bags of rice produced in Fukushima Prefecture have been subject to the prefectural government's blanket testing, and the screening has cost around $54 million each year. No rice has been found radioactive exceeding their standards, which in that year was 500 atoms a kilogram. There is no safety standard. There's just monsters. And there's so many of them, you can't possibly keep up with it. The prefectural government in October began sending its workers to the rice shops across Japan to advertise the taste and safety. The taste and safety. It's such a bizarre statement, isn't it? Japan's government promotes the idea you're racist if you are avoiding Fukushima product, and nuclear activists to be constantly spied upon. And they don't mean like just the internet or something. They mean spied upon. Like, it's absurd what we're talking about. And there's not many of them, so there's a lot of people vying for that job, right? U.S. mines race to restart as uranium prices skyrocket. It's been a long time coming. So there's a yellow cake on the stock. It was a company showed up on the stock market. There was Sprott Physical Trust in Ontario, Canada, showed up on the stock market. And there was a couple more. They raised money, and they went out and bought all the physical uranium available, which caused an artificial inflation. And that's all it was an artificial inflation. And they got investors to invest their life savings into it, mom and pa kettle, who immediately, within weeks, lost their entire life savings. And they pulled this scam over and over and over for about, this is year 4 now? We've been covering it since the inception, right? Well, Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, I think, is actually a little over 2 years old. So about 2 years. Now they got the price up to almost $100. It was up to $100. It was almost up to $107 or something. Now it's back down to $94 or something. Because it's this scam, right? And it's a scam over and over. But you can see it went from March 2019, or June 2019. That's when it started. And then you see starting to trend. And then like it kind of stays up and it's bouncing down, trending down. And then there's a couple of jumps in 2021. And in 2023, you see it bump, 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 bump. And this is because they bought up, there was more, they had more money, so they bought up more of the physical uranium and created this artificial demand, which tricked the investors into buying it and they cashed out. They bought it for $30 a pound or something, well, less than $30. And then when it got up to certain numbers, like $60, $70, $80, $90, they start selling it to the investors. They pushed it hard too, right? And like the Globe and Mail here in British Columbia, or out in British Columbia, Canada, was one of the most egregious ones to do it. And John Ciampagli, Chief Executive Officer of Sprott Asset Management, an actual real-life demon, who makes a living by stealing pensioners' life savings, which is typical of the nuclear industry, I've noticed over the years, isn't it? 13 years since the Great Japan Earthquake, the 2011 Quake survivors and radioactive fallout survivors are left to rot in these the original places they took the victims from the radioactive evacuation. They put them in these little boxes, and they had these vending machines outside. When you put money in it would start singing "Don't Give Up on Fukushima," and there was exorbitant prices too, right, for the basic necessities. And so they've been abandoned now ever since. This is typical of the nuclear industry. Relief efforts in the aftermath of the Noto Earthquake. This was the Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation. The 7.6 magnitude earthquake was 7 kilometers northwest of Suzu. And here it is over 2 months later. We're still trying to get the whole story of the Noto Peninsula, and in particular the Ishikawa nuclear power plant. And so anybody who's been around quite a while know I'm slowly gathering up and building that picture. It's very difficult to get any information. It's unbelievable. So this Buddhist Foundation, volunteers on the 13th day, January 13th, had provided over 7,130 hot meals because the government didn't go there. They wouldn't let the United States, they wouldn't let China, they wouldn't let India or any other country go in with the search and rescue specialty teams and specialty dogs, particularly in the first 72 hours to rescue the victims, and has refused all help ever since. And we don't know what's going on in Ishikawa and the community of Ishikawa, where it was they had the biggest earthquake you can have was at Ishikawa, and also at Suzu, by the way. And so we're very grateful to the foundations like that, because without them, these people, there was over 30,000 people for the first 19 days. We can confirm, we know it was longer than that, but the first 19 days were living on a slice of bread, just no butter, no jam, no nothing else, a slice of bread and a cup of water, a paper cup, which are it's not like a glass of water, it's very small, right? So now that the Buddhist Foundation is sending eco blankets, the thick versions, and shawls and scarves will be sent to the temporary shelters to combat the cold weather, because the government has completely abandoned these people, despite the government has allocated almost $2 billion, but they're not seeing nothing. That organization was founded in 1966 or so. Bless your hearts, you folks. Baseball gloves are donated by Otani, arrives at the quake-hit schools. And let me go backwards. Don't matter. This is an amazing story. More soil liquefaction caused by the Japan Noto quake than the major 1995 Great Hanshin Earthquake. So the red dots, I've done a comparison for you. The red dots are liquefactions. You notice it extends all the way up to the Niigata. Niigata had 6,700 homes destroyed by liquefaction due to the Noto earthquake, which was a 3,000 to 4,000 year old fault line. So you can see where the Ishikawa nuclear power plant is too. Then that's right where all that liquefaction is too. Now remember, they had a 7 out of a 7 earthquake, which is because the Japan, the sly Japanese, the deceitful, deceptive, dishonest Japanese use the Shindu scale. And so the Ishikawa nuclear power plant is right there in that big pile of liquefaction that extends quite a ways inland. And they use satellite photos and ground stuff to determine the liquefaction. According to the team, at least 1,724 spots in the prefecture, Ishikawa, Toyama, also prefecture, Niigata and Fukui, which is where there were 7 nuclear running power plants. And we don't have any documentation on that. And I apologize, but we did look, and we can't find anything. Their ongoing research is the first study on the full scope of the phenomenon triggered by the Noto Peninsula earthquake, which is that's a 3,000 year, 4,000 year old fault line that finally ruptured. And they knew it was going to happen. They got 8,000 earthquakes there each year for the last 3 years, when normally they only have 20. So everybody should have been abandoned. Everybody on that peninsula should sue the government for not telling them or giving an option to abandon it, because they knew this was going to happen. And now they're going to give them loans to rebuild where a 3,000 year old fault line just tore apart the whole bloody peninsula, which is over 100 kilometers out. So the disconnect doesn't make any sense unless you're talking about evil. Then it makes perfect sense. It's believed the damage caused by the January 1st tremors, these are not tremors, this was significant due to the long duration. So calling it a tremor, there seems to be an agenda to not call it an earthquake. If you look up the word tremor, it applies to sonic, not to actual earthquakes. The total number is reportedly expected of the liquefaction areas to surpass 2,000. And they had over 1,400 major landslides. And liquefaction will repeatedly arise in these same locations. Well, because they're having an average of 21 earthquakes a day. Fukushima nuclear wastewater discharge case begins. Hearing begins. So any of these stories you're going to see are going to be based on tritium. And if you missed the beginning of the show, I explained that deception extensively, right? And to show you this picture, because if they show you the reactors, then the story doesn't work, right? So if they show you this pictures, then the word tritium doesn't work anymore. They got a hearing with a lawsuit. There's 363 fishery stakeholders, ordinary citizens nationwide, against a corporation that is bankrupt and is not even supposed to exist, and was nationalized by the government right away. It was held at the Fukushima District Court in Fukushima City, which means there's no way they're going to win, and it's 100% sham. In August 2018, And 15, the government promised Fukushima Prefecture would not proceed with ocean releases without the consent of stakeholders. And of course, we've covered that, right? I was on the ocean in 2015. I was on the ocean doing research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And what we found out was Fukushima is an extinction level event. So I went back for 5 more years, 4 to 5 months each year, to see if the species recovered, and they didn't. For the citizens, it might be said that the government of the country is a government that can lie without hesitation. And stress that, which is 100% accurate, obviously. Stress what is being released into the sea this time is not just tritium, but a wide variety of radioactive substances. This time. Like, what do you mean this time? And that's the only story they're going to post, is those kinds of stories where they talk about tritium. Because talking about anything else doesn't make the tritium lie believable, right? So when you talk about tritium, wherever that radioactive fallout lands, if there's water, that becomes tritiated, but the original radiation is still there too. And currently the whole planet is full of tritiated water because radiation is everywhere now. And that the ocean in the atmosphere is tritiated. We have destroyed our planet. Well, the nuclear industry did. We didn't do it. We would have never done it. They hid all these attributes away, and now they want to blame you. Lawyer Hirota told the China Daily that the Japanese legal proceedings. So here we got a lawyer who doesn't know the buildings blew up. We got a lawyer who doesn't know there's radioactive fallout covered the entire planet. And we got lawyers that are not representing the victims, they're representing the company by manipulating the victims. Why is anybody talking about tritium when the whole planet is covered in plutonium-239? And the evil never takes a break, I notice. A letter storing nuclear waste in Canada's north would bolster the region's capacity. It will serve as a linchpin for northwestern Ontario's economic resilience. Andre Ganji. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization secured 1,500 acres of land, of farmland, not land, but farmland, prime farmland, north of Tewater, Ontario, farmland. Now, they only need about 250 acres for the facility. The rest of it, they're going to keep farming. They require 250 acres, which is 1 square kilometer. And the remainder will continue to be used as it is today for farmland. We're committed to protecting the environment and farmland. And so, like, they don't use the word farmland very often, do they? Right? You can find it somewhere else. Farmland. And when you see the picture of these people stood up in the middle of a field, this is from the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which has $28 billion for 18 years. And their solution is to put it in smack dab in the middle of prime farmland, like every other nuclear dump and every other nuclear power plant is surrounded by farmlands. And that's an agenda that is not tenable, it's not sustainable. That's a betrayal, unlike anything else. And there's no other story out there that compares to this story. Right? There is no other story that compares to that story. So they only need 250 acres. The other 1,250 acres they want to continue farming. And so what they're going to do with the 1 square kilometer and the 1,500 acres is that's where they're going to build a repackaging facility. So they're going to transport it up by truck. Now, when they transport radiation by truck, everything is vented. So the whole route is going to be contaminated perpetually with radioactive fallout from trucks every day, right? When it gets there, it's still vented into all. This is what they need to maintain the farms in order to ship the radiation out of that area in case independent people come by. And that's the quickest way to poison you so you don't complain about it. You're too busy trying to stay alive, right? So not only that, they're going to repackage everything at the surface, which means everything is still vented, but vented in a whole different way because they're repackaging it. So all these communities are going to be just absurd amount of radiation. And the mayors and a bunch of councillors and that will make a bunch of money, but all that money will go to healthcare quick enough, and their children and loved ones, they won't get enough money to make them healthy again. Let's put it that way, right? Because greed will trick them into going ahead with it, and then when the horror of the reality sinks in a few years later and everybody's getting sick, they sign the paper, baby, and so there's nothing you can do. This industry is very, very, very keen to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. As many nuclear reactors sit idle, inexperienced workforces grow. So Japan shut down all of its reactors. This is a reactor where they train the students. They'll pass the course, but they got no reactors to practice on. And so this is a nightmare waiting to happen, isn't it? The victims of the 2011 disaster trapped in billions of yen in unpaid debt. So we'll get chased off our property by radioactive fallout. Oh, you poor thing, here, take a loan. So now you got to work like a dog to pay back a loan when you didn't need to do nothing because you owned your property, you owned your home, you had assets, you had all kinds of memorabilia from your childhood and your great-great-grandparents and everybody else, and you couldn't go back. You left your pets behind. Now you're in perpetual debt. Nuclear is nothing but just a misery machine every direction, isn't it? It's just a misery machine. Nancy Bross notes from a Vermont activist: the decommissioning of Fukushima is a pipe dream. Well, bless her heart, but she only talks about tritium. She talks about the fort dump when they never stopped dumping it. And even a precursory look at the reactors would have showed that multiple ones blew up. And it would have been obvious that tritium is the very last one you're worried about. And she sings and dances around the fake narrative. This is all we ever see. That's what makes it into the media. If you're really good at regurgitating the fake narrative, the media is happy to interview you and promote you. They'll even get you to write a book, sure. Macau's ban on Japanese food imports is set to continue. Was imposed August the 24th last year instead of 13 years ago when the nuclear reactors melted down. So this is how they keep the scam alive, see? People, what's wrong? Well, there's tritium. Oh, really? What's tritium? And everybody seems to be completely incapable of comprehending even the smallest iota of the story. Buildings blew up, radioactive fallout covered the planet. The very foundation. And I don't think we've ever met anybody, at least in the last 10 years, that has told that story. We haven't met a single academic that acknowledges fuel pools are gone. And how can they not be gone? That's reactor 3 detonation. How can they not be gone? How does that even work? Oh, excuse me, my apologies. 13 years on, hard-hit prefectures encouraging learning about the disaster. Do you get any idea what kind of a joke that story is? They don't encourage learning about the disaster, my goodness. Here, let me teach you about learning here. I got a great one for you. So when my show was over last night, I had barely got 71 views, but the show only showed 4 views when the show was over. 4. Because for the last couple of months they robbed me of my views. Normally I'll get 100 views, right? When I took down my other site a couple of years ago with 25,000 subscribers, I always had 300 views at the end of the show. And had 100 thumbs up or something, right? So when we're looking for spiders that are missing, now I had 22 likes, which that was an incredibly low number. I've never seen that low of a number in thumbs up before. And I had 4 views. That's a super, normally you get at least 11 views, which is just cheating me. And then for hours, I barely got any views. 13 years on, bumpy roads continue for the Fukushima. Okuma, there's nobody in Okuma to write the story, first off. TEPCO began releasing tritium containing water. This is lethal by the liter if you walk past it. And it shows some useful idiots. And none of this makes any sense unless you understand the big picture. Telling lies just seems to be natural, don't it? 2 months on from Noto Quake, 11,400 evacuees are still in shelters. Which are like refugee camps, right? We mainly eat noodles and microwave food. If you microwave your food, you kill 80 to 85% of the nutrition. And there's no good talking to anybody. You're like, that's okay, I like it. I like the microwaves. Yeah, but it destroys the nutrients, the nutrition in your food. Like, once you put your food in a microwave oven, you get more nutrition licking the stamp for your meal than you will out of that food you're going to be eating. I'm going there. This was one of the rare stories we've seen about Shika. And they show you pictures in the background is of Wajima. Why you show them? But it says Shika, but that's not Shika, that's Wajima. They're recycling the picture over and over and over for 60 days now. Which is interesting because there's 75,000 houses destroyed just on the Noto Peninsula. 67 homes destroyed up in the Niigata prefecture from liquefaction. We've never seen any of that. We just see the same pictures over and over. This is Wajima, where 200 houses and businesses. But the damage there was significant, right? Suzu, 3.1%. That's how much water is restored in Suzu. And the epicenter was 7 kilometers north of Suzu, where the mayor originally said 4,500 of the 5,000 homes was destroyed. And it measured 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. They don't tell you the word 7. They use the maximum 7. So most people glaze over. So 75,000 houses in the Ishikawa prefecture, and add another 6,700 homes for the Niigata. Who knows how many is in Fukui? Uh, 13,000 houses were damaged in Wajima. So why do they keep showing us the same picture over and over and over when there's 13,000 other houses that are destroyed. The majority of them are destroyed, not just damaged. And 9,400 in Suzu. But yet we've only seen probably 7 houses in Suzu. A lot of sewage systems, 65% of the 393 kilometers of pipes in the northern part of the Noto Peninsula were damaged. Which is 255 miles, 255 kilometers of the pipes. 255 kilometers of the sewage is destroyed. So that gives you an idea of the damage, right? Of how, because the Earth rose up 13 feet, and there was a 150 kilometer fault line that ran through Ishikawa. Emaciated Gaza children. So the Holocaust has gone to Gaza. The Jews are committing Holocaust against people that don't have any tanks, don't have any aircrafts, jet fighters or drones, don't have artillery. Israel's the 4th biggest weapons producer on the planet. It's just ridiculous. The whole story is ridiculous. The Jews are causing Holocaust so they don't have a Holocaust. They're attacking the children and the women. They're not attacking the Hamas, which they created. They kept 5 million refugees in refugee camps surrounded by Israeli soldiers with German Shepherd dogs. Sound familiar, don't it? 21% of the quake-hit Japan area's hospital nurses may quit amid a crisis. Yeah, they've been abandoned. And Japan agency warns of more quakes as tremors continue east of Tokyo. The word tremor should never be utilized in that environment, right? These are for sonic waves in the ground. This is not what we're talking about. It's meant to downplay the significance of what's actually happening, right? The IAEA confirmed safe tritium levels in Fukushima latest water discharge, and I covered that extensively at the beginning, right? So apparently nothing got out of these buildings. I think that's amazing. That is just incredible. Isn't that wonderful? Nothing got out. And so I started early night because I'm just burnt out. I'm too burnt out. I couldn't wait. I just want to get the show started because it's so difficult. And I feel bad saying this, but we're going to have a snowstorm. And the reason I feel bad is because Dana Nasana has been trying to dig out from serious snowstorms that makes me look like a baby crying. We're only going to get 35 centimeters tomorrow and another 30 centimeters the next day, so 2 feet of snow basically. We're going to have very strong winds, so it'll whip it up 4 or 5 feet high of snow. And it's not supposed to start till I think tomorrow afternoon, but who knows. Now Dana's got something like 7 feet of snow over where he's till, which is, so I feel bad complaining because we're going to get 2 feet, right? But you got to realize I'm not very healthy, right? So 2 feet is pretty devastating for someone like me. But I'm ready. I got a pretty good system to deal with it, and I'll do the best I can, but we're going to get trounced. International Atomic Energy Agency says nuclear reactors around the world now commission 2 times faster. But actually nuclear's gone backwards again as wind and solar skyrocket. So last year, 2023, this is the last year I'm going to cover, nuclear power suffered a net loss of 1.7 gigawatts as 2 large reactors. Whereas renewables got 507 gigawatts, which is equal to about 725 large reactors. Animosity equivalent, but in renewable energy. because that's all they can do is lie, right? Telling the truth is not an option. But apparently lying is an incredible option. And that's the only option they really got, right? And if they told the truth, the industry, which doesn't deserve to breathe air. The people in the nuclear industry, they don't deserve to breathe the same air as me and you. These are just parasites. These don't have any redeeming quality whatsoever. Anyway, I'm so burnt out. I'm not sure if I'll make it back tomorrow night. I most likely will get a little show in, but it won't be a full show, and I apologize for that. It's been a tough week on me. So if you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. If you've got an account, you can do it. Should the International Atomic Energy Agency be banned from nuclear sites for claiming nothing got out of the Fukushima multiple nuclear meltdowns? And I think we all know the answer to that one. But, you know, when I put out a poll, the idea of the poll is to tell a story, right? It's to tell a story. And if anybody hasn't been around for the beginning of the show, because I started early, it's worth going back and watching, because I have 3 videos there from the BBC. The first one, in 2013, talks about what was going in the tanks. And it's a completely different story than you're hearing currently, I can tell you that. It's definitely worth finding that video and listening to it. And listen to the whole video and the 2 videos that follow it. And because that information is unbelievable until you hear it, and it debunks everything they've been saying. That's the BBC. And they changed tunes a few months later, right? They pretended they were in Reactor 4, and then in 2021 they pretended they were in Reactor 3. Excuse me, my apologies. We'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow night. Try to get in a little show anyway. A couple years ago, we had much even more snow. We tried to wrap your mind around that stuff. I don't know what I would do if I had that kind of snowfall here. So I feel pretty bad for cleaning. 2 feet of snow is we're on to that significant. I don't know if I can keep up my goodness. Have a great night. See everybody. Hopefully tomorrow night. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow.